Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. Welcome back to part 2 of this 2-part interview with guitarist and songwriter Anthony Rossomando. In part 1, we explored his early years and life on the road with the Libertines and Dirty Pretty Things. In part 2, it all stalls out. But what in retrospect looks like a long quest for meaning somehow leads to sobriety and the now legendary collaboration with Lady Gaga, Mark Ronson, and Andrew Wyatt. I had, in truth, forgotten how powerfully Shallow hit me when I first heard it in A Star Is Born. But man, this conversation brings it all back. Won't you please welcome Anthony Rossomando.
And I had this loft space in Shoreditch, and I became like I built the studio in there, the piano, and it was amazing for a few years. I mean, it's around the time I met Mark Ronson.
Right.
Gaga came over to the house. Amy was there. Adele was there. Wow. Florence. I was really close to this band, the Claxons. Keira Knightley lived across the street. My buddy used to write films and come over, and my local pub, the Griffin, became like the center. Vice magazine was around the corner. We had a bunch of friends that worked there. My friend Milo put out the Claxons records, who now manages FKA Twigs, this band, The Big Pink, The Horrors. One of the guys in The Horrors lived in my building. It was an incredible scene, and I was excited to be out of the kind of Camden Libertines, Dirty Pretty Things world. My horizons were always a bit broader, and I was just having a blast. And I decided I'm going to host a party.
Right.
But I'm getting deep into, I'm taking a lot of drugs on my own. Weird pills like 2CBE, 2CEs, like manufactured like psychedelic meets MDMA.
Right.
I get into my super psychonaut experimental phase where I'm taking acid by myself in the afternoon and vacuuming my house in my underwear.
Amazing.
You know?
That sounds so nice.
And I'm drinking nice red wine. Right. And I'm going out with a beautiful girl who's what I'd broken up with my actress girlfriend, and she, and I was really sad, but I was trying to fill up that thing with partying. Sure. And my friend Jamie was on my couch, seemed to be on my couch every other fucking day, and people were just always over.
Are you making music?
I'm like in my lab, and this is when I thought I liked writing with a hangover. I could only write with a hangover. Right. It's because I have mania. Right. And I'm essentially, I'm bipolar, and I was just trying to balance myself out.
Had you been diagnosed?
No, I was diagnosed with ADHD in college, which was fucking bullshit. Right. And my dad was like so anti that getting treated. Yeah. My parents were so anti, and then I found fucking Dianetics on my dad's table once. I was like, this makes sense. He was reading the fucking Scientology shit. I mean, they never became Scientology, but I think Dianetics was a very popular book in mainstream.
I remember the advertisements in that time.
A lot of people,
all over the place.
They tapped into the mainstream by basically this false prophecy of like psychology being bullshit, which is easy to absorb because it's like, who the fuck are you to tell me I have a mental condition? But it's like, It turns out that some of it actually makes sense. People who study things actually are, and I don't know, we live in this era where the dumber you are, the truer you are, which is just fucking bullshit. But that's all right. When mass disease hits us, they'll turn to scientists.
Exactly.
It'll take something like that. But so I'm in this cycle now where I'm living like I'm still in the cool band, right? But I'm not, and that lasts for a little while, you know. But eventually, it's like, I don't know. I remember Rose, who I met writing for Mark. Basically, what changed my life is Mark was like, "Hey, what's that song you played me one night? Like, I have it for my album," and it's like, I don't know. I like that one. And my girlfriend at the time's like, give him whatever he wants.
Are you crazy?
And I'm like, what do you mean? He's just like, so, I wrote a couple songs. They both got on the album. And I was like, I wrote every day. And it just kind of clicked in my weird clouded mind. Like, oh, you write all the time. Maybe you can write other people and I can monetize this. Because I did know the idea of being back in the band and getting on the road was going to mean something was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that was the decision to break up the band between Carl and I. We were selling out every show.
Right.
Every gig was sold out for Dirty Pretty Things. And it was a great live band, and people would come see that band, even if we made middling albums.
Right.
But we broke it up because we were dangerous
right.
to each other. So, you know, I thought that was my fix. And now I'm doing ayahuasca ceremonies in my house, and I'm taking a lot of LSD. I would take, like, LSD and then not tell anybody I was taking it to observe people's behavior and see the truth behind what they were saying, you know? And I felt like this enlightened dude. But I do remember Rose, my girlfriend at the time, saying, do you know, I'm not really cool with the whole opium thing. She's like, it's kind of creepy, you smoke it off the stove. And I'm like, well, you have to get it hot, you know, to make it bubble.
Sure.
She's like, yeah, that I get that, but like the whole thing is kind of dark, you know? And I was like, oh, I'll just have it. I was like, okay, I won't do it around you.
And had you been diagnosed as bipolar at this point?
No way, no. Not the English fucking health system. Nothing against the NHS, but someone just said, you're depressed, take this antidepressant. And I got involved with a cult around that time. Me and Carl and our girlfriends got involved with this cult. It was so fucking weird, man.
What was that called?
Oh, Free Mind Project.
Right.
Oh my God. He like just hit on our girlfriends and then got entangled with the wife, and there was a loss. It was insane. I was out of my mind.
Right.
You know? And then this guy tried to fucking get up with my girlfriend. I threatened him on the phone, and I don't know. I remember saying, "Hey man, thank you for helping me find myself. I just remembered who I am." And he's like, "Oh, what's that?" And I was like, "I'm the guy that's gonna kill you. I will not be stopped. So if you see me in public, turn around and walk the other way. I cannot promise you that I will not stop until someone pulls me off you." So I don't know. It was like anger, resentment, and complete oblivion. I mean, I'd only known oblivion, and now I was getting to do it without having to go on tour or being in this band. The constructs of being in a rock and roll band, where now I was free of that, whatever that is. So I took myself off the antidepressants, which was a misdiagnosis.
Sure.
I just went in there because I was sad.
Yeah.
You know, because I was crashing. I mean, I had so many pint glasses in my flat that I had taken back from the pub.
Right.
That I would bring back 25, and I had one of my bank cards that sat at the pub at all times in the envelope in the book.
Ready to go.
Yeah, ready to roll. So this is just what my life was, but increasingly I wasn't really doing songwriting sessions. I was just wake up at 1 or whatever, and if I was really hungover, I knew that was a good time to write because I could quiet all the voices in my head. And I found this comfort in hangovers. And I think that's a really poignant self-reflection, observation, because it wasn't just the bits where I felt like high and stable. Because I wouldn't get high, I would get stable.
Right.
I had this mixing formula of booze, coke, and weed. And I would also put the coke on the joints. I loved coolies. That was like one of my things. And I just controlled this intake so that I always stayed level. And then I got and that was a wonderful place for me to operate from. I felt so comfortable from like 1 or 2 in the morning or to like 6, you know. There was this 4-hour window that felt like a magic, where I was lucid, I was clever, I was funny, and I was remembering stuff and having these conversations and being turned on to music by some very fascinating people who changed my life. So it's very hard to see, you know, you acknowledge that you have a problem when you do things like, let's break the band up, this is too much. And then boom, it's fixed.
Yeah.
You know, or like, oh, I'm gonna switch to opium because that's a little bit more calming. Boom, it's fixed. Or they gave me antidepressants, like, oh, I'm fixed. Or I joined a cult. Or, you know what I mean? Or eventually it was the ayahuasca, you know, and he's like, oh, you can't take ayahuasca and be on any SSRI.
Right.
So I take myself off the antidepressant, which is like not the best move, but my system couldn't tell.
Right, yeah, there's so much other stuff.
There's so much other stuff, and I'm bombing MDMA and whatever. So... And now I'm looking for this now I'm on this spiritual journey, right? I'm like a psychonaut. I'm doing ayahuasca and I'm taking more LSD, and I was trying to take less cocaine because I had realized after the first ayahuasca ceremony that was bad for me.
Right.
But then, of course, this is another out-of-body, psychedelic experience that is teachable. So it's almost like all these moments, different drugs are teachable moments.
Right.
So I was kind of proud of myself for I'm like, I'm going to do this now.
Right.
But it's all just a search down different holes looking for a spirituality. It's like I was bereft of any spirituality. I was just all looking for it out here, right? All of that is outside. It's external.
Yeah.
So, I was pushing this external balloon farther and farther down to the point where, I'm doing these ceremonies, and I think there's teachable things in the ayahuasca and stuff like that, but it wasn't like I then became a vegetarian and a fucking Buddhist, and like I was still fucking drinking my face off,
right,
and maybe doing a little less blow. But fortunately, the songs I wrote with Mark put me on the map, and that brought me out to LA.
That brought you to LA. So
yeah,
did you sell,
I got signed a publishing deal here.
And did you sell the space in
I
London,
moved out. I was in. So here's the thing. Money stopped coming out of the bank machine.
Right, that's a bummer.
And I started selling gear in back alleys for cash.
Right.
So this is probably 2012. I'm starting to sell my stuff to survive and drink and take drugs and not pay rent.
Right.
I moved out of that flat because I owed like 10 grand in rent.
Right.
And I wasn't a citizen.
Right.
So I just thought I was so disorganized. The entire block was full of my stuff. I put some in storage, and the rest I just laid out there. And all the homeless guys came. I knew a couple homeless guys, and they came around. I was like, tell everyone to come take my clothes. And, it was crazy. I had all this. I moved to England with a suitcase and an acoustic guitar. And by the time I left, I had nearly 500-600 books, art, guitars, drums, preamps, microphones, furniture.
And you just put that shit on the street?
Most of it.
Right.
Yeah, most of it. A lot.
It's like I gotta fucking.
I moved in with my girlfriend into this apartment like in Stoke Newington, and that was a fucking nightmare. And she was hardcore, and all we did was use and hang out and get drunk. And she was beautiful and smart and was a very talented musician. So I was always surrounded by
people with this shit going on.
Yeah, but like looking back, stunted. Like they're still stuck.
Yeah.
And I came to LA and was kind of like, I never wanted to live here. I thought everybody here is a fucking moron. And but I knew people here, and I was welcomed.
So you had a publishing deal with
downtown.
And
administration deal. So
right. So they basically are selling your shit,
but they're putting me in sessions.
Right. So you've got
the key is the song I wrote with Mark and Andrew, that Boy George sang.
What was that?
It's called "Somebody to Love Me," and it was loved by people in the industry.
Right.
And it was a top 10 hit in Australia,
right?
And got synced to some fucking commercial. Some supermarket took it for a commercial on continental Europe. So one day I get an email that says, "Hey, they want to use this song," and my share of it was I had the largest share because I started the song.
Right.
So I made about 90 grand in overnight off this song, and I was like,
"Oh, it's back!
I'm back, baby!" And then I just like.
And where are you in LA at that point?
I'm in London.
Right.
But that gave me the fuel to keep going.
That gave you the fuel to just like blow it out.
Oh! There's a line in a Libertine song called "You Pissed It All Up the Wall." Well, I like snorted it all up my nose.
Right.
It was, and also flights, because when you're just off your tits all the time, everything you do is a fumble.
Right.
Every time you get the ball, you drop it. You're like, oh. So I book a flight 24 hours before and fly to London.
Paying the most amount of money possible.
And the second I drop in, I'd be like, oh, I better go get some blow because I gotta stay up to balance out my jet lag. It's just like, it's crazy.
Yeah, you're telling yourself crazy stuff.
And eventually I'm here like at an infinity pool party at 7 in, and I'm fighting over this like last couple bolts in the bottom of a Dewar's bottle with this guy was like a famous Australian skateboarder and was now one of the most cantankerous, bitter alcoholics. And I used to think he was cool because he was one of the non-fluffy LA people that I would know. But he wasn't cool. He was just very dark, like Dark Lord.
Right.
And I'm looking out over this infinity pool, the sun's rising, and I'm like, I don't even like this guy.
Right.
No one here is any of the people I even know in LA. I was driving around at like from party to party during rush hour in the morning, high drunk.
Yeah.
In a Miata I rented from Rent to Wreck, a 91 white Miata. You know, I've got my friend and she's standing up in the seat with a mini skirt on, and it's like 9:30 in the morning and we're going to a party. I mean, I was oblivious, and I'm so lucky I didn't like kill anybody.
Yeah.
So I became the guy who still lived, and this is what's really depressing about the whole thing, is I became the guy who still thought he was in a really cool band, but I wasn't.
Right.
And but I'm acting like it.
Right.
And out here, that in LA, that I had cachet here because nobody here is fucking cool. You know, like
Right.
just everything here is not really that cool.
Right.
So
right.
if you're from that band in England, it's like
Right, you're cool.
You've got a bit of. I had a bit of credibility, and you know, and I traded on that, I guess. But I was showing up to sessions, and you know, I was with the wrong management, and I was getting put in with like EDM guys, guys wearing leather jackets that were really new, and I was like, "You're not on the Strokes, dickhead," and like, you can't be cool, like you can't dress like that because I can hear the music you're making, and it's like totally lame. So, and I was really depressed because this is such a visual culture here. Everybody's trying to climb into this thing, and boy, talk about me already feeling dark and empty, and coming to a place that has a lot of vacuousness was a lethal combination. So now I'm selling whatever's left. I burned through. I don't even know where that money went for the sink.
Right.
Like, where did it go? I should have made it be able to make that last for 3 years.
Right.
I don't even know. I have no recollection. So there's all these missing years now that happen in LA where I'm just kind of, you know, in this, like, what do they call it? Bouncing along the bottom?
Right.
Like, kind of cesspool.
Right.
That I was wading in the cesspool. Never quite drowning, but never getting onto dry land. Just kind of like, you know, just floating in mud. I was very, very unwell mentally. And I was trying to check myself into a mental institution. And, my doctor, I went to the doctor because I had this problem with my arm, and I was seeing this girl who on the first date told me she had 3 different types of ketamine. She was a drug dealer.
Right.
I was dating a drug dealer.
Right.
And a dancer, and she's fucking fit, man. She's super hot. But we were doing ketamine all night. And,
Right.
you know, I remember the first night she goes, Calvin or Klein? And I was like, oh, she was like a raver. I was like, is that raver talk for coke or ketamine? She goes,
you were able to put that together.
She goes, yeah, have you never heard that before? I was like, no, because it's stupid, but it was pretty easy to figure out.
Right.
And she goes, oh, huh. I was like, yeah, anyway, both. You know, and I put out both fists. And she was like, oh. And I was like, yeah, just both.
Hit 'em.
And I just went boom, boom, like that. And she was like, oh. And I was like, did you say you have mushrooms? So, you know, and my sister had just gone to rehab recently, and, you know, I still couldn't admit I had a problem. I went to the doctor for this thing. I have this repetitive strain injury in my elbow, and I'd been on a 3-day bender, and I'd slept with this other kind of faded glamour pop star, and then showed up at my girlfriend's house, and she didn't care. She had made me pop brownies at 8 a.m. and invited me over. And I got back home. I'd been up for 2.5 days, and this is when I could really stay out for a couple days.
Right.
Because when if I didn't have anything in my system, it's like this mania that I have would keep me going. My brain would keep me up. You know that feeling where you're physically absolutely toast, but there's no way you're going to lay down. There's no way you're going to sleep. So I go in, and I call up the doctor. This guy takes 2 months to get in. And they're like, oh, we happen to have a vacancy today. Someone just canceled. Come in. I was like, oh, thanks. Because what I said was, my arm is really hurting me. I have to have this looked at.
Right.
And I walk in there and I sit down, and they give me the sheet, and like I checked every box for being depressed or whatever. And I was just being honest. And he comes in, he goes, so what's going on with you? And I say, oh man, you know that tendon in my elbow is really acting up. And he just rolled his eyes, sighed, and went, no. Why are you here? What's going on? And I was like, and I almost started crying. And then he says, you know what? Do you remember my old office? I was like, nah. She's like, my old office that was up the road that you used to come to that I only left a year ago. I was like, I can't fucking remember. She's like, well, I used to think you'd come in high. And I was like, oh, fuck no. No, I'm the kind of guy that would get high and then call 3 days later and make an excuse. Like,
right,
you know,
right.
Oh, I had to do this thing where people are like, yeah, we don't care. You already blew. And he's like, no, I realized that you didn't after a while. He goes, but he had been observing me in these kind of, you know, every few months, every 6 months, I would come in apparently, and I don't remember when I'm in mania.
Sure.
I have no recollection. But I would pace around the room, talk a mile a minute, tell him all kinds of stories and things that were happening that were real and not real. And then he would see me a few months later and I would come in despondent. And he's like, I think that you are an alcoholic for one. He's like, didn't you try to get sober a couple years ago? I was like, yeah, my friends, a couple of musicians had brought me into the rooms and I lasted about 60 days.
Right.
And someone put a bottle of champagne in front of me. And I was also, I couldn't function. You know, I was like, there's no way I can function without drinking. I was like, yeah, I tried. He's like, well, I think you have a severe bipolar. I've been observing you for like 2 or 3 years. And he's like, and you are an alcoholic and you're a self-medicator. He's like, and if you don't, we're going to find a meeting list right now. He's like, you're going to go to a meeting. He's like, and who's your friend that brought you in? I was like, oh, my friend Andrew. He goes, yeah, you're going to text him while I'm standing here. And you're going to go to a meeting. He's like, and then you're going to call me. He's like, and I'm booking you to come back here on Wednesday. He's like, and if you don't do these things, he's like, I'm going to recommend you go to rehab. But this is you have one chance to do this outside.
Right.
So I hung my head in shame and I just went. And the first meeting I went to was Pathfinders.
Right.
And I couldn't even see out of my own eyes. So I didn't realize there was anybody in there who knew me. But it turns out there was. And those two people walked up to me and were like, hey man, it's good to see you here. You're in the right place. And I was like, get the fuck, what? And I was like, oh, whoa, that dude's sober?
Right.
Like,
That's
he was
always
a
amazing.
psycho.
Right.
I was like, I'm not a psycho like him. I didn't punch people. And I was like, you know, they made me take their numbers. And then I told my friend and he was like, hey man, I'll meet you right now. And all of a sudden, all these people just wanted to help me. And I didn't really understand that at all. And it was so hard. I mean, the first couple days isn't hard for some reason. It's like I hadn't gone without a drink for more than 48 hours for those 19 years. It's not like I was one of those guys who like, I was like, oh, I'm cool. I'm not going to drink for a couple weeks. No. Never kept a promise to myself. Never once. So the first couple days work, I was so desperate that it was fine. But once like day 4 or 5 hit, I was shaking. I mean, I didn't know what to do. But I had all these people. And LA was the only place I was ever going to get sober. And I thought I came here to pursue my career. I thought I did it. And like, no. I came here because it was the only place that I would have ever gotten clean and sober.
It's the best place to get sober.
It's the only place.
It's the only place.
And here's all these shining examples. And then there's like, you know, some very famous songwriter, singer friends of mine who have had all this success after getting sober in their 40s.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, that's what I needed to see. And I just thought, maybe if I can just stop. And then I had people calling me and I would call people. I mean, I can't express how much the outreach and the people without the judgment. And I used to show up to meetings late all the time because I couldn't fucking show up to anything on time.
Right.
And I would stand outside shaking, just going, I'm 10 minutes late. I don't know if maybe I should just go. I should just not go in. And then someone would walk in. I'd be like, oh, I can go in.
I can go in.
It was just such a mess.
Totally. I was the same way.
You know, and I just started putting days together. I'd say I just started putting days together. And all of a sudden I had, you know, I did like 80 and 90 or something. And then I put together, and then it was like 100. And then from 100 to 120 or 30 seemed like it seemed like years. Because my system, I don't know, maybe there's something about 3 months, but I think the system started to clean itself out.
Right.
And everything took, the days were so long. it was excruciating pain.
And did you get treatment for the bipolar disorder?
Not for a little while.
Right.
But as my doctor suggested, that was phase 1.
Right.
And then it just happened. Like about 4 or 5 months in, I was a nightmare. I was just running at the mouth, spinning plates, telling everybody all these stories that I was just living in fantasy. And then when the fantasy wasn't real, at night I would just crash and cry and act like a teenager. And I think this is true for most people in early sobriety. But I was particularly tripping balls on my own, like, internal brain energy. So I went and saw a therapist. I didn't say anything. Got diagnosed. Got recommended to another. Got a second opinion. Same diagnosis. Saw a psychiatrist. Same diagnosis. They recommended medication. I was super resistant. I felt like a stereotype.
Right.
Here I am. I'm in LA. Now I'm this rock and roll sober guitar trying to get sober. Now I'm going to have one of these Hollywood diseases. This is fucking bullshit. I mean, I couldn't get out of my own way. And she said to me really early on, I have a lot of work to do with you, and there's no way we're not going to get anything done with you like this.
Right.
Like, so I just said, oh, fuck it,
Let's try.
It was basically a series of events of me putting my hand in the air. And that's what that call to the doctor was, It was, I just wasn't going to listen to anybody until, and that's why people with MD and PhD after their names, for some reason, I don't think that I've always viewed that community as being like, well, I see a lot of people, I'm going to give you suggestions, but if you don't take them, I don't give a shit.
Right.
Like, that detachment was actually what convinced me. Because I was like, oh, they don't have any bias.
They don't have a horse in this race.
They don't have a horse in the race at all. They're like, if you want to fucking die. I mean, maybe you'll last for another 10 years. So it was the medical professionals, which I went, oh, well, they don't. Maybe they're right.
I sort of remember meeting you a couple of years ago. And then I feel like you went out on tour. Is that accurate?
Well, I went on tour with my sober friend who said, do you want to join the band and do some touring?
Did you guys start a new band or was it an existing band?
No, I jumped in this band called Mike Snow.
Uh-huh.
And it was an opportunity for me to try to tour without drinking. Man, those first few shows were crazy. I'd never been nervous before.
Right.
I don't experience
you've
that.
Been so
oh, man, I'm like, whatever, bros.
Right.
Totally. And also, I could play. I knew, as any, like, proper medicine user and self-prescribed,
right.
self-medicating person, I really dialed in how much I can drink before, during, after.
Right, how to manage
Never did blow before a show. I
mass.
experimented with coke before a show, but that wasn't our cycle. We started the drugs right after the show.
Right.
Actually.
But you boozed before the
show.
show.
Yeah. Firewater.
Right.
Probably because we stopped drinking about like noon the day before.
So you gotta
sleep for 4 or 5 hours, do interviews, go back to sleep, get woken up, take to the club around 9 o'clock, on stage at 10, and we start drinking around 9.
And what was it like being on stage sober?
I mean, horrifying. I was so aware of every movement. I was so aware of like all my hands, and awareness was not my thing.
Yeah.
Being unaware, being oblivious, and it's such a visceral experience.
Sure.
Playing live, it's like the closest thing that I had to a spiritual connection.
Sure.
So,
did you get to a point where you enjoyed it?
It only took about a couple weeks actually, because I think I'm a bit of a natural when it comes to that. So, once I realized I could enjoy playing live, that was a huge breakthrough, and I think that's part of the reason my friend. He asked me because I was a really good fit, and I can multi-instrumental, and they're trying to cover a lot of parts with 4 guys, but I'm also like, I'm a pretty solid dude to like throw into a band situation. Like, I know how to tour, I know how to keep the jokes running and keep it light, and so all of a sudden, it's like I stepped off one timeline and hopped on a parallel timeline, and now I'm on tour, and when I visualize it, it's like a tube full of light as opposed to just like a wormhole of darkness. So now I'm hitting all these, I think the first tour was US and, classic, like Kansas City, Austin, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, DC, whatever, Durham. And I'm going to bed at like midnight or 1, and I'm waking up when the bus lands in the other town at like 9 or 10, and I'm getting up and I'm going for coffee and walking around, and then eventually me and the guys all buy bikes, And we put the bikes under the bus. So I wake up in the morning and someone from the crew is taking my bike out and put it right there. And I get a little phone thing for my bike and I put the fucking phone in there and I tap in where we're going and I'm riding my bike. I rode my bike around like Austin, all the bike paths, Cincinnati, down the river.
And are the other guys sober?
One.
So
me and him would get up and ride our bikes. And I was like, I've been to all these cities, but I've never seen them outside. Yeah. I only saw like downstairs. I was like, I know they have an amazing Frogger machine at that bar downtown St. Louis that I believe I did coke off the video game machine and nobody cared, And now I'm getting, so it's like, it's an incredible thing for me that I basically had to get my whole microscope flipped and now I've gotten to do this touring in a whole nother, basically, it's so plainly down the line of like, I was on the dark side of the force and then I was on the light side of the force. It's unbelievable. And I had an amazing time touring. I had such a good time,
And then how does the Shallows come along?
So, shit, that was before the touring, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Well, that was about a year and a half into... Not quite into sobriety. So I'm about 6 months into medication, maybe a little bit more. And Mark hits me up and he's like, hey, do you want to come to the studio, Gaga? And Andrew's coming. I was like, yeah, maybe. He's like, Andrew's coming. I was like, oh, all right, I'll come. Because he knew I would go if Andrew was going.
And where were they at that point? Are they in LA?
Yeah, everyone's in LA.
Right.
They're up at Rick Rubin's studio.
Right.
We meet up at that spot and have steaks. And Gaga and I had hung out years ago when she came around the apartment.
Yeah, sure.
Right before Poker Face came out.
Right.
Or Just Dance, actually, her first single. She was still on a bus. She was kind of a nobody at that point. And we were reminiscing about that night. And they're like, let's come back to the studio. And they played a couple things. And we were wrapping her album. And there were some beautiful songs on there. And then Andrew kind of had these chord changes, which ended up being the verse changes. And she sat at the piano, I picked up a guitar, and the three of us just kind of sat around the piano. And she literally, we wrote it like this. She basically looked at me and said, tell me something, boy. And I gave her the next line.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like the movie.
It was just like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because I'd been writing about this stuff.
Right.
So
what's the next line? The next line is
I had Ain't It Hard trying to fill that void, just sat there. And I had Ain't It Hard being so hardcore.
Being so hardcore.
Yeah, I had that line lying around in my head.
I mean, it's so
she did the A line, I did the B line, and then she said, or do you need more? And I gave her that line. It was like A and B, like that. It was so strange. Because I didn't really feel any pressure, I
guess the thing is, that line really hits me because, man, it is hard being so hardcore.
Ain't it hard being so hardcore, man? Are you ready to give up?
Remember that feeling of just, not knowing anything else. Look, my using days and my drinking days are a fucking shadow of yours, and yet still, to me, it was intense and it was hard.
Don't start comparing, man.
Compare
less than, greater than.
Compare and despair. Yeah. But when I heard that line, ain't it hard being so hardcore, I was just it's just such a relief to not have to be so hardcore.
I can't express to you how perfectly couched this time was and what I was thinking about and how it lined up. Are you tired of trying to fill that void, man? I mean, this is all I was thinking about. It was the first time I started thinking about these lines summing up. It was the beginning of me having a writer's perspective on what had happened. And there's a Wordsworth quote that my friend Jez Butterworth had mentioned to me once, and I think I was telling about. It was so weird. I went up to this cabin, and I started writing about this ex-girlfriend from 2008. And he goes, tranquility rendered, or what is it, emotion rendered in tranquility. It's something time has to fucking pass.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you realize something. So it was just, the moment was right, man. I was just tuned down enough by the mood stabilizer that my mind wasn't thinking of one thing and then opening up a window of a universe of which would then lead me away from where I was. So I could pull thoughts down. I still had this antenna kind of brain, but it wasn't, the disturbance and the noise was just because, one, I was finding a spiritual core, which gave me that perspective of like, oh, I was filling holes, man. I was trying to fill a fucking spiritual void. It was what I was thinking about. And me, I mean, some of the lyrics in that song are like my interpretation of what I was hearing in meetings.
Sure.
And my brain and my chemistry being fucking balanced out a little bit. I mean, I had a 2-part program, always the spiritual program first, which is what AA is to me, because I gave my will and my sense of control and power over to God. And then this very scientific, studied approach to my brain chemistry. And the fact that nobody made me feel bad about that in AA, and that coincided very well on, that moment, that song, it all came together. It's almost like my life was, you know, some rickety fucking spaceship trying to land, and it landed on that moment. Do you know what I mean? Like that it tried and bumped off the surface 1,000 times, and then the world spun in the right way, and it was like, this is where you're supposed to land. This is where your perspective on your life is going to be rendered, and there it was, man. It was wild. And
are you guys recording as you're writing? Is someone taking notes?
Not this night. Yeah, there's like one mic on. So, but then we got together a second time, and that's where we really put the chorus together, and she got the typewriter, and she sat at the piano again, and we kind of found that chord change in the chorus, which was really important. It just like shifts key. It shifts in a really interesting way. We didn't even really notice it until we had to learn it for the Grammys, and Andrew and I were looking at each other going, dude, the changes in this song are pretty sick. We were like, did we write this shit? Yeah, because like, to be honest, like, you know, I don't think the initial reaction from most people was that they liked the song that much. And I felt really bad because I had quite a lot of lyrical input on it. Right. And like, I put these kind of weird ass, like, a lot of the chorus is about presenting to people that you're fine when you're not. That's how I was interpreting it. That's in my mind, that's what I was kind of writing about. I was like putting up this like, watch as I fucking dive in, like I'm a party, I am the fucking life of the party. Sure. You know? But like, you know, never meeting the ground is like I'm a fucking levitating force, but really, you know, you fucking crash, man. It's like, it's a nightmare. And you're hiding in your bed and you've got your fucking blankets over your head because the fucking sun's coming to the window because you live in fucking California, not London, where the sun never comes out and you can just stay, you can go to the pub at 1 p.m. and it feels like 8 p.m., you know? Right. So I got very, very lucky because essentially Bradley Cooper hears the song and it's just like, oh, this is the song. Like, this is the song about the guy that they write together. And, you know, and this is where all the extra magic happens. And, like, man, I mean, I wrote the song with the most talented fucking people on earth. Mark, Andrew, and Gaga. And then you've got this guy with a vision. And he's, you know, Bradley Cooper's the one that said, hey, can we make this a duet? We just changed boy to girl, the second verse, or vice versa. I think with the second verse we wrote first. Right. That was the first one, and then we did the... but then he decided, switch them around, make it a duet, and everyone was like, sounds like a great idea.
And he integrates it into the script, because it's like such a... I mean, it is the movie. I mean, in some ways, the song tells the whole story.
Because it really sounds like a relationship song when it's a duet. When it's from one voice, it's a relationship with one's own...
right.
For me, it was with your own
inner addict.
Your inner addict, that mania, that up and down swing, and being held to that.
I guess, and that's what I mean as a love song, listening as an addict. The idea of like Lady Gaga finding me and saying, "Have you had enough, man?" Like, yeah, it's just like it's so beautiful.
She literally said, "Tell me something." I was like, "I'll fucking tell you something right now." I'm fucking tired of trying to fill the void.
Yeah.
And I'm I was finally coming to grips with that. It wasn't that cool what I was doing. Like, it was hard.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how hard it was until, like, I got clean for a year.
Right.
And I got a bit stabilized, and I was, like, trying to give my will up to a higher power. And I was like, fuck, this is hard, but not as hard as it was. That was, how did I live my life? Talk about unmanageable.
Yeah.
I mean, so...
What?
And she asked me right there, and I just fucking told her, and it worked,
It's amazing.
And she picked the stuff she likes the best. So you feed her,
Yeah.
and that's a blessing, because I don't know.
Yeah.
I knew a few of them are good. There were a couple I questioned her later. She hit me about this is funny, about a year and a half later. This is after she knew that they were going to use the song for the movie, and we were kind of excited, but we also didn't know how the movie was going to turn out. There were a lot of question marks. And she hit me up to find Andrew and say, like, can we do one more day on this? And I was like, yeah, let's do it, because I really think the pre-chorus should be different the second time. I don't like how it repeats. She's like, all right, well, I think it's perfect, but I wanted to try something else. I was like, okay. That session never materialized, because everyone was too busy. We missed the 4 hours that she had to move to Sunday, and Andrew was already out of town. And so, funny.
So there's another version of the song in your guys'
that
head.
We never
in
made.
your head.
Oh, in my head, it's way
recorded.
better. It's way better in my head. So, it just goes to show the opportunities to, fix, quote unquote, something that didn't happen, played into it. And mostly this fucking incredibly talented man who had a vision for his movie found the vision for the song by creating it making it a duet. And none of us thought of it like that. And that's why so much of the success of that song is, I just did, we created it, but that doesn't mean it gets viewed that way.
Well, I always say that about movies, that there is this alchemy that has to happen in the process to make a great movie.
Oh, for sure.
It's just, as you say, you make this song and they're going to use it, but who knows, the movie may be, even with Gaga and Bradley Cooper.
Doesn't mean the movie's going to be good.
It may not work.
Doesn't mean it's going to be good, and it also doesn't mean, the song may not be perceived in the right way.
Sure.
And I know a couple people on the inside who didn't hear that vision for the song, but he did. It took a non-musician.
Yeah.
And he highlighted it in that way, and I mean, so much credit goes to him. I think, because essentially the song is a 2-hour music video directed by Bradley Cooper, starring Bradley Cooper.
You fall in love with that relationship over that song.
And that's why the song has so much gravitas in the end, The song is a good song. I always said the song's like an 8.5.
I mean, I heard the song before I saw the film. I heard it on my Spotify Discover, and I was like, this is the song? This song's fucking amazing. But then I saw the film, and then it took on a whole, I just took on a whole
That's why
new thing for me.
What I consider to be I don't consider it to be an incredible song, but I consider it to be very good.
Yeah.
I give it an 8.5. But the reason it's perceived as a 10 is because fucking Bradley Cooper's movie is amazing, and
those actors, really bring it to life.
He was incredible in that, and she's phenomenal.
Incredible. Totally fell in love with
that movie. And all that shit is. Talk about things out of my control.
Yeah. So, and then the film, the song goes on. Does it win a Grammy? Does it win?
Yeah.
It wins what?
First thing it wins is Golden Globe.
Right. I remember that. Right.
Which was when we realized the hype might be true.
Right.
Up until that point, I'm just kind of like, well,
is anyone really going to
Hollywood? And everyone around Warner Brothers is like, you guys. And I'm like, yeah, but surely there's all these. I'm very sensitive to echo chambers,
right?
And I see them on Instagram all the time, where people think people think that other people care about what they're wearing on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
But I guess they do. But it's really embarrassing.
No, it's always hard to tell.
So I'm like,
is it just us?
Surely the camp for the other movies telling them.
Yeah.
So, and I don't like mega publicity and press. I find it to be full of a lot of pressure, and I also think it's jinxing,
Sure.
But when they called our name at the Globes and we went up there, and what's her name, Taylor Swift, hands us the fucking thing, I was like, holy shit, this is happening. this is gonna go all the way.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody after that was like, you know, they're like, the path is paved, and like, and all these industry people. And then we won the Critics' Choice Award, which was like a big deal because that was the night Glenn Close and Gaga shared Best Actress. And Critics' Choice isn't like as publicized, but it's considered like that's the critics. People really listen to their viewpoint, and they're super critical, I guess.
Yeah.
But man, there were motherfuckers whispering in my ear about all this shit, talking shit about my friends and shit, and I was like, who the fuck are you? You know, like some guy's like, bro, Oscar pussy. And I was like, this is like the worst bro I've ever met.
Oh my god.
And I was like, and I'm sober, so I'm kind of like, you know, like
don't take that away.
Gross. I was like, oh, this is the part of it that's sticky gross, and icky and gross, and so I tried to enjoy it, and then we won the Grammy for Best Song for a Movie, and they won for Best Duet. We didn't win Song of the Year. But I think that was going to be tough considering we already won for the movie, and it was attached to the movie. And then, of course, like, you know, the Holy Grail, where everybody was like, dude, if anything's a lock at the Oscars, it's your fucking song. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. What if we don't win? What if we don't win?
You gotta prepare yourself for that disappointment.
So I remember listening to All the Stars, the Kendrick song, a lot around that time, just going, this song is sick. It was huge on the radio.
Yeah.
And if it wins, I'll be really happy. That's what I did to temper out. Because everybody's just so excited. I'm getting messages, Instagram, stories, people in interviews, and all this shit. And it's getting pretty intense. And I'm living with Mark at this time, so we're kind of going through it together. And it was really kind of fun. I mean, it was fun, but it was also really intense. And there's like the Oscar lunch, and there's the dinner, and like I remember we had this dinner at the Oscar house. By the way, there's an Oscar house.
What is the Oscar house?
Like the Illuminati castle, you know. I'm sure the like right wing conspiracy sites think they eat like, you know, turtle babies in there and there, but really it's just a bunch of really lovely people having a few drinks and sharing stories. But it was about 3 or 4 hours into that dinner. It was just the music and just the actors. And of course Gaga was going between the two tables because she was up for both. And it was about like 3 hours into that dinner where I realized that was my birthday.
Oh, wow.
And I forgot.
Yeah.
And Herbie Hancock, who I was sat next to, who was our guest musician, goes, man, you must be having a good fucking day if you forgot it was your birthday. And I was like, he's like, your life is good. I was like, hell yeah, it is.
That's funny.
You know, so that was my, like, kind of tripping on, like, how amazing this was.
Yeah.
Not like, you know, watching Rami Malek just getting blasted and going, good for him.
Yeah.
Like, if I was his age and this was happening to me, I'd be fucking killing it too. But I didn't feel pressure. And Stephanie, to her credit, was always like, hey, do you want me to get you some non-alcoholic beers? What are the ones you like? And she would just send one of her lackeys to go pick me up like a 6-pack of fucking O'Doul's if I wanted it to get me through a moment.
Right.
So, you know, I had a real affinity for near beer around then, because someone would bring me like some near beer, 0%, and 0% Heineken.
Right.
And I get to crack it, have a few sips, and then I would just get bored. But it would get me through that little moment. Because it was tricky, because, I mean, it's Hollywood, it's the Oscars, it's the Grammys, everybody's partying.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I find, like, you know, I've been through a little of that, and that there's also a lot of pressure, you know?
Oh, my God!
It's like, and it's not pleasant. There's a lot of people telling you where to go, and you have to show up for shit.
Oh,
and like,
sticking a microphone in your face.
And there's a lot, there's the flash bulbs, and like, it's intense, and like, it would be nice to be able to like, dial that down with a couple drinks, you know?
Oh, man. I kept thinking how fucking lucid and chill I would be.
Yeah.
If I could just have a couple bolts of whiskey.
But there's something also amazing about being present for that.
It was too present. It was too heightened. It was like buzzy.
Yeah.
But I will say, everything was palpable. Now, I don't forget a moment of it, really.
Sure.
The feeling in the room that night was... You know, they play the songs throughout the ceremony.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
and
everybody was gunning for us, man.
Didn't they perform Gaga and
yeah,
Gaga? Everyone was like after it, they're like, they're fucking. Like, I mean,
Oh
was
yeah,
definitely
and like everyone's texting me.
the charisma.
Everyone's
the
texting me.
chemistry between
TMZ's
them.
trying to get a hold
Right.
of me to confirm they're fucking, and I'm
Right.
like, no, they're just really talented like actors. Like,
Right.
they want you to think that
Totally.
because in the movie they were.
Right,
And what's
right.
happening right now is beautiful because they're doing it in character.
It's amazing.
But they're not in character. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was a really cool moment, and everybody there was so excited for us, and everybody loved the song. What
Yeah.
was really cool about it was we would do these like Today Show or Morning Show, whatever. All the the press run was like a maze of microphones and like spray tans and shit, and invariably we'd finish a little interview, and the interviewer would just stop and go, I just want to say, this song has been so important to me and my son, or like
that's amazing,
my mother
right?
and
Yeah.
I like really bonded over this song because we lost my dad a couple years ago and he was like struggling, or I fell in love with this guy and it just was just like this and I threw myself into it and it was almost, and I was like, that's the stuff that I tried to absorb to balance out like the Oscar pussy guy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's the stuff that really sticks with you too. It's
Yeah,
like
but-
Oscar pussy guy is like.
I'm like, but I just use him because that was
Right.
the most like kind of gross, poignant, like bottom of the barrel example. But I just sat in the middle, and what really got me through was meetings, man.
Right.
I went to meetings and I shared about how bad I wanted to fucking party,
Right.
and how I would know how to party better than all those fucking boring cocksuckers, and how I would have had the best after party, and I would have been making out with Madonna in the kitchen, and whatever the hell
Right,
it was, and I got to share in front of these friends and other men, and then after the meetings, there are a couple guys that really identified with that raging mania need to fucking lead everyone down with their, as my therapist would say, she goes, you like to get out your little fucking pan flute and prance down the street and be like, everyone follow me, follow me down to Mexico, bro.
Right.
So being able to, I mean, it's indispensable. It's like the first, and also I just got reminded, like, what's first before awards, before press, before tuxedos, actually, is just my program. So the anchor of being able to put that first, and it was a challenge. I had to actively put it first almost every day. But as someone said in a meeting the other day, like, the topic was like letting go. And I was like, yeah, letting go. I'm doing that. Letting go is not just putting things aside. Letting go is a process of which you have to dive into. And I tend to let go by just working or distraction or whatever. And when someone said it the other day, I was like, oh, that's what I was. That's what I was doing at that time, was in the process of letting go of this need to be off my head, to need to sedate myself, to perform in the interview part of it or in front of people. I had to continue letting go, but I didn't have anything to shelve it. I had to just deal with it. So it was a very teachable few months. I mean, from the time the song came out in September to when we won at the end of February, and then the week after, the song went #1.
Right.
So I was like, oh, we didn't need anything else. Like every week we got nominated for this.
Something amazing happened.
It was #1 on the iTunes
Right.
chart for like 28 weeks.
Yeah.
It was like extraordinary. And all it was very teachable moments on what a test, to not pick up.
And
I was just, for the record, around the time we wrote the song, and somewhat up until the point where it came out, I was putting groceries back at the grocery store. I had no fucking money. I was taking Uber Pool. I was resentful, but I was living with a total douchebag, a guy who collected microbrew beer, who like shouted at the TV when women came on. Some asshole my buddy found on Craigslist to fill up a room in the house, who was like, well, he's not like a junkie, so he pays rent on time, but he turned out to be one of the just worst. I didn't met me. Oh my God, I've curated around these people, so I was not like living it up. Like I made a joke. My friend joked to me when I was at the Oscars, he's like, you are the brokest guy in the room. He goes, and that includes the ushers. And I was like, I know, and nobody here knows. And I held that almost like the way a stage actor, sometimes they will draw on their legs.
Right.
Or do something that is a secret
Right.
that holds their character, holds them in their self. And my secret was actually helpful. And I was like, my secret is everybody here thinks I'm fucking killing
it's
it.
all on and I'm fucking broke.
But I didn't use that as like a poor me. I was like, all right.
That's an amazing lesson, actually, to give you perspective on what you're going through. Like, this is not real.
It's not real.
The real thing is, like, I can't pay for my groceries. Like, that's the real fucking thing.
I mean,
and, like, this is great. And, like, the real thing also, like, it's funny, when we were going into this interview, the thing that I was excited to ask you about was the Oscars. But, like, I have to learn this lesson again and again in this creative business. Like, really, the great part is making the song. The great part is working with talented artists that you're vibing off of and having and like creating. And then it's like that all that stuff that the press loves and the publicity and all those are really just sales tools.
They are, yeah. It's the industry promoting itself.
Yeah, and the rest, and the real thing is the joy of creating.
I don't have any problem with it, but I am a writer, and I cannot get caught up in that, because it's important that I stay very close to the ground, because that's what I trade on. I trade on my past, my cachet, my credibility, not coming up in the fucking pop industry. I'm really good in the room. I sit there and have a conversation. I mean, Shallow came out of a conversation we had at dinner, and that's why when we actually wrote it, I was just locked and loaded, because we just talked about all this recovery that I was in. And, I don't want to out my buddy, but he'd been in recovery for a long time. Very part of the reason. Gaga, definitely not in recovery.
Right.
But very spiritual, prays all the time.
Sure.
Has her own way.
Sure.
And is a wild fucking child. And then you've got Mark, who's just a very controlled, calm, sane, guiding the ship, keeping the rudders on, one of the great producers of our generation.
Sure.
So, I get to be, and these are friends that I've known a long time, so I get to be myself in that moment.
Sure.
I mean, it's unbelievable. But I was very aware afterwards that I needed to protect that. So, I was watching it all happen and saying, oh, this is good. I see why the point of this is. This promotes all the art. It helps everyone sell more of the art.
Right.
It propels the industry forward. It's why they have the Heisman Trophy. It's why they have, it's just what it is. And to be recognized in that way was extraordinary. But what really had an impact on my life was in November when I got an email that said I had excellent credit.
Right, you're back. Now you're really back.
And my dad is still not paid off that $20,000 house they bought in the 70s, because they have no fucking money, and like they just remortgage over and over again.
Right.
Like people do in this country.
Yeah, totally.
And I send him a screenshot, and he's like, I almost fell out of my fucking chair. I'm going to put the mortgage in your name, because that's a better credit score than I've ever had. And I just went, go for it, bro. Like, put it in my name. Like, it's crazy too. I also had these resentments building up as we were being recognized, because I started, I felt like an imposter, and I had no idea how to enjoy it, but I figured out how to, when I would talk to friends and family who were gathering around the TV, talking to each other at the supermarket. I was like, oh, they're having so much fun. This is cool.
Right.
For them.
Yeah. Let it be cool.
But I was starting to resent my publisher, for example, who wouldn't give me $10,000 over the summer to pay off some bills.
Me some fucking money.
And I was like, this song is in the commercial. It was like in the trailer.
Right.
And if you watch the trailer, I'll never forget the first time I watched the trailer, I dropped my phone, because I was like, I played it for my friend Jez, and he goes, your life's gonna change big time. I was like, this looks huge. He's like, it looks huge. And I was like, cool. So I called my publisher, can you chuck this $15,000, man? I gotta pay for the studio. I got no fucking money. And they're like, well, I don't know. We don't know the numbers. Maybe this isn't gonna... I was like, did you see the trailer with the Gaga and the Cooper guy and everybody singing the fucking song that I wrote, that I have an equal share in? Like, what the fuck? It's gonna make $10,000.
Yeah.
It's so, I was getting resentful there, and my management company always kind of treated me like a second-class citizen. I mean, I'm sure part of it was because I was probably pretty unreliable.
Right. I mean, you have your whole long history that you bring in the door, and suddenly it's like, well, shit's turning around. Like, is it real? Like, everyone's got to be wondering, like, is this really?
And
real?
I was also immediately like, where were you guys when I was struggling? You know, I was really quick to be like, where the fuck were you guys?
Yeah.
I'm about to be because I'm seeing already everyone's
reaching out to you.
Everyone's jumping to attention, like, yes, do you need to get those tickets for the thing? I got it.
It's starting
and I
was
like, yeah, go do that shit. Because
nice.
I remember what it was like in the Ladies and the Dirty
sure.
Pretty Things to have people do shit for you. But then I was like, wait a second. I don't need people to do shit for me.
Right.
I can manage my life now. I've got 3 years of sobriety.
So what, I mean, obviously we've been talking a long time and we both have to pee, but what are you doing now? Are you're writing songs and
I'm doing whatever I want.
Yeah.
And that is, I write with artists. I don't really do pitch songs.
Mm-hmm.
There are some very talented writers here who write big songs for Bieber and Maroon 5 and you know, like Post Malone and Ariana Grande. They kind of have their own crews. And Post Malone's so talented. He doesn't need any writers. But they have their own crews and stuff. But there's people who just write, you know, for Harry Styles, whatever.
Right.
I am not one of those people. And
Right.
I didn't come here to be one.
Sure.
And I'm like a very emotional writer. I can't, you know, whatever. My branding is probably going to be the guy that writes the Gut Wrenchers or the whatever, but I don't really give a shit. I got thrown around a little bit last year. And I was like, yeah, whenever I write a song for pitch with other like big pop writers and producers, it's never really that good because in the process, invariably, the producer will be like, but maybe you could be a little bit more general.
Less
specific.
Less you, essentially.
This could be less you. And I'm like, yeah, it should be less me. Because this isn't about me.
So maybe someone else should write this song.
But I found this singer called Donna Missile, and we wrote a song together last year, and we just sat in the room, we wrote the fucking song, and she told me what she wanted to talk about, and I was like, okay, let's do that again. She comes to my studio in June with her fucking suitcase. I'm now living out of a suitcase too because I decided I didn't want to be around. I was living in Mark's guest house.
Right.
I was living like a fucking king with my awards. And I was like, he's like, I think I'm going to sell the house. I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah.
So I packed everything away. I was like, I got to get away from everything. Time to live out of my suitcase like a fucking hobo. I've got a few bucks, but I'm like a hobo again. So I'm stressed. I haven't accepted any of my success. I hid all the physical representations of it, and I was like, "What are we talking about?" And she's like, broken up with this dude. She's got her suitcase, and this is where I can facilitate and be of service, and you know, I guess where my talent lies is actually like diving into this thing and what are we talking about? And like I realize now that's how Shallow came about, and that's how I wrote this whole album with Donna. Now it's finished. Finished it on Friday. I wrote a majority of the album with her because she had something to say, and I'm going to help her figure out how to say it.
Right.
And that is a real process, and that's me and the artist, and that's me basically just like I have always done. To come back to it full circle, I play guitar and write the songs with the very talented singer. From the first band to Dirty Pretty Things and Libertines and everything. That's what I did. And now that's where I can be of the most use. Is like with an artist in the room. And if it feels good, then boom, maybe we'll make a whole album. Right. But now that I've done that, I am not in a rush to do that again.
Sure.
So I'm working with this kid Borns right now. And I'm going to do a few more songs. I'm probably going to have like 7 or 8 songs on his album. And then I'm going to take off and go work on some songs for myself. And I'm just not...
You think you'll tour again with a band?
Mike Snow in my tour. Andrew and I wrote a bunch of... I wrote a few songs with him for that. So it's all kind of by timing and feeling, and if he wants to do that. I have a little record deal offer on the table to do my kind of...
Right.
Also,
your own thing?
Yeah, so
Anthony Rossomando.
Here's the trade-off is like the lyric content I'm pulling from shit, and I think I've got to keep some of the stories for me, and I'm going to just make an album full of those stories.
Sure.
So that'll be a great thing to get off my chest. And to me, that's just another cathartic process of connecting with my spiritual journey. So the process is really important to me, but that's the kind of shit I'm doing now. And if like, that's it. I just work on credible records. If they make money, they make money. I never got into this to make $20 million. I just don't give a shit. I'm going to be able to buy a house. I have excellent credit. I work hard. If the songs with Donna take off, if they work, they'll really work because they're real.
Yeah.
I'm just going to make sincere music with real singers in the room. I'm not going to get into the factories or these things called writing camps, which I used to think I wanted. I used to be like, why didn't I get invited to writing camp?
Right, yeah.
Why am I not at the writing camp with all the cool Swedish writers? I guess, I guess I'm not good enough, or I'm like I'm a liability, but I wasn't being put in those rooms by my management company or my publisher, and it made me hate myself and think I wasn't worthy. Right. And then
and now that
I go on the phone with Carl, and he's like, dude, are you kidding me? He's like, those people would be lucky to have you. He's like, they're all fucking total fucking chasers. He's like, they're not the real deal. Yeah. He's like, hold on to your fucking shit. And I was like, oh, I can't believe that about myself, But I have these real friends I met over the years that had my back, and I just held my space, and then I've had the success, which is just, God willing, I had that, all those things fell in line, and now I get to I never sold out. I never ran around town. I got the opportunity after, and I tried a couple things, and I realized, that's not me.
It's not gonna work.
So I get to be me, and I get to be sober, and I get to work through the things that are uncomfortable, and I get to use this outlet, this medium to do it. It's like I couldn't be a luckier guy, And then when I forget that, I make a call, I go to a meeting, or someone that fucking calls me when I need to be called, and I talk them down off the ledge. And I couldn't be a luckier person right now. So,
well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming in.
You get me started, man.
No, I really I would have cut you off or intervened had I not been really into it, but it was really it was great to hear all of that.
Hey, so if you've been enjoying this podcast, you can head over to my Patreon page and feel completely free to support the show with a modest contribution at www.patreon.com/The Drunkalogs. This episode was produced with engineering assistance from the talented and generous Mark Solomon. The Drunkalogs cover art is designed and created by John DeManil, and the Drunkalogs theme song is composed and performed by Stephen Stout. I am Nick